Francesca, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to have a chat today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Well, I'd like to start off, if you don't mind, by just getting you to kind of briefly introduce yourself, summarize the current role you're in, and maybe a little bit about your background leading up to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Francesca Lagerberg, so I probably have one of the longest names that makes me a CEO. And I'm CEO of Baker Tilly International, so classic professional services firm that operates in multiple jurisdictions around the world. We're a top 10 accounting firm. We're actually number 9. And I've been in my role for just under a year. But I've been in professional services pretty much all my working life.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there that you're approaching a year in your sort of new role, if we could still call it that. So I guess I'd just like to hear a bit, if you don't mind, about kind of your experience during that time with the firm, and any key challenges and key priorities that you're sort of facing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just coming up to my first anniversary. I've absolutely loved it. I've had the most extraordinary year. I think when you get into a new role, you always spend a little bit of time getting to understand what's the same as other situations you've been in and what's very different. And I've got to meet pretty much every firm that we have in our network now. Got over 140, so that's taken nearly a year. But also been really impressed with the ambition, the desire to grow in a sustainable and profitable way, and just the fact that people are truly wanting to work more together. And I think when you're running global professional services, it's all about connectivity. It's how people work together, choose to work together, what they do, which is helping clients across borders. And that's what we're all about, trying to make sure we offer the very best services for our clients.
Focusing slightly more on challenges for a moment, if you don't mind.
Well, nothing like coming off the back of a global pandemic to leave a few challenges lying around. You've got the war in Europe, you've got massive global instability, you've got seismic political change, you've got consolidation in the professional services market, you've got newcomers coming in, you've got people trying to change the dynamic of how professional services work. So a couple of things ticking away there. But that's the joy of the world we work in. We work in a volatile environment, and our job is to help clients through it. So even though there's been some pretty amazing things going on in the last year, I think it's pretty typical that the key job of professional services firm is to help people navigate through the storm.
Yeah. Given that sort of from our perspective, our audience is primarily UK based, and that's the market we generally cover. I was just wondering if, like, in your capacity as a global CEO, you could talk a little bit about the global context and how the UK perhaps compares to other jurisdictions and the challenges it's facing.
Yeah, I think if you step back in terms of the big political piece, it's pretty well known that the UK economy has not been doing as well as some of its economies that are close by to it. And also it's had a lot of political turbulence, 3 prime ministers, short period of time. So I think that instability has been quite a symbolic factor when people look at the UK. It's unusual. It's normally a very stable country. Some of that has made people feel a little bit nervous. Having said that, you're beginning to see more consistency coming in terms of what people can expect when they're doing business in the UK. But if you go around the world, you've got just an extraordinary number of things happening. I was in Argentina a couple of weeks ago. They're in hyperinflation. I was sitting just about 3 days ago in South Korea, and there they are sitting next door to a country where there's a lot of political instability as well. And then I was in New Zealand about a week ago, and again you've got very, very successful economy coming out of very difficult times that happened during COVID. So I think that whole thematic around big change, unusual occurrences, political turmoil is pretty consistent in almost every region of the world at the moment.
I mean, you mentioned the sort of economic slowdown, particularly from a UK perspective. What can you tell me, if anything, about how that's been reflected in the services that your clients need and sort of the questions they ask and that kind of thing?
Well, I think sometimes when you have a lot of turbulence, the tendency is to retract and just go, I'm just going to see what's going to happen. I'm not going to make any big decisions till I know a little bit more about what the future will hold. But for an entrepreneurial business, you can't do that forever. at some stage you want to start doing things, or you may see there's an opportunity. So quite a lot of the work that we do is about helping people who are wanting to do things, they're sort of transactional things they need to do, want to do. And it's about how do they time it, how do they make it operate well. And you just have to get on with running your business, and you have to make some decisions, even if the future looks a little bit less clear than it might have been. I think from a UK perspective, you're beginning to see a lot of businesses have a little bit more confidence about the future, which is helpful. But have they got as much confidence as some of their potential competitors in nearby countries? So there's a interesting few years ahead for us from a UK perspective. But I'm by nature quite an optimistic person, so I tend to take a view that sooner or later these cycles work their way through, and the key is to give the clients the best possible information on the facts that are available.
Yeah. What do those trends look like from a practical perspective in terms of service lines and the services that Labour Utility is offering? Whether that's creating new ones, dialing back others, shifting priorities, shifting resources around. Is there anything noteworthy there?
Well, like all accounting firms, we do all the basics. We do audit and assurance, we do tax, and we do advisory. Advisory is quite a broad church, of course, covers a lot of things. And we've seen growth in all of those areas over the last year. Audit and assurance still continues to be a strong annuity part of our business. Tax and advisory, there's a lot of projects that go on in that space. But we've also seen great growth in our legal practice. We're a multidisciplinary practice, and we're really proud of that. And we've been growing our legal practice and seeing some newcomers joining us and seeing us as a good platform on which legal services can be offered. But in terms of new things, probably not going to surprise you that we're just spending a lot of time on ESG. It's everyone's favourite set of abbreviations at the moment. It also really matters. It's important for the planet, it's important for clients. And for clients, it's really about what do I have to do? What could I do? And what should I do? And they're not always the same. So you've got quite a lot of mandated verification coming down the track in terms of showcasing what you're really doing, proper verification, showing you're not greenwashing. On other issues, it's about maybe there's some other things that I could do that would be really make us more sustainable, and that often leads to advisory projects. And then there's that lovely piece for us, which is about walking the talk. If you're in this space, you need to make sure you're doing the right things as an organisation as well.
When we're talking about any service lines, perhaps ESG in particular, the big challenge that goes around that is the talent side of things. So I don't know if you can perhaps talk about what that looks like on the ESG side specifically in terms of, acquiring those capabilities, because it is a more up and coming, niche area.
For the ESG experts who sit at that top layer of high expertise, they're like gold dust. Everybody wants them. There aren't many because it's a newish field. So like all organizations, we're looking to attract the best talent, but there are going to be fewer of those people available. But then some of the other areas, they're absolutely in the heartland of what we do. How can you do verification? Well, we know how to do that. So it's having a proper methodology, making sure our people are trained to meet those standards. And you can continue to upskill your workforce to meet some of those needs. But it's certainly going to be an area where I think a lot of people are very keen to enhance their own skill. It's an area that they're personally very attached to. They think it's a hugely important area. They want to move more into ESG practices. So there's a lot around internal training and helping people get to that next level so they've got the credentials to be able to offer those services.
Yeah. And just sort of final question on that ESG side. Why do you think there is so much emphasis on that and so much demand for that among, client bases right now? Because obviously, if you're talking about small to medium-sized enterprises, they're not necessarily obligated, to report on their carbon emissions right now. So there's going to be, other motivations involved and pressure from different stakeholders. How important is that?
I think there's pressure on all sides. They might not be obligated today, but they might be obligated a little bit later on. So some are getting ahead of the game, going, well, it's the right thing to do, so let's do it now. We don't have to wait to be asked to do it. Why don't we do it at an earlier stage? I think responsible organisations, of course, are looking at this in any event. They want to do what's right for the planet, and so they're making those changes. And also, I think there's a lot in this where people go, I'm not quite sure what to do. I want to do something. I actually want some advice now so I can work out what are the right things, the right steps to take, because they might take me a long time. So I'm not going to wait till I'm told to do this. I'm going to start looking at these today. What can I put in place? And I think quite often business is ahead of legislation. It's looking to do the right things. And as you say, stakeholders are undoubtedly going to say, well, actually, what are we doing? Are we doing the right stuff? Should we be doing more? And they'll have a range of stakeholders who'll be flagging this as an area where they ought to be thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess while we're talking about sort of client appetite and demand, you mentioned that your advisory service has sort of been doing well. It's been booming. There's been growth in that area.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think the appetite is there? Because I think in other areas of the market, like at the very top end, we've obviously seen with the amount of cuts recently on that particular side of those businesses, it would suggest that the demand has decreased. But perhaps in the mid market, from my understanding, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, there is still a real demand. I think, intriguingly, when you ask deal makers about optimism, they tend to be a little bit more pessimistic about what the future might look like. But when you're actually dealing with businesses, they're going, well, actually, there's things we can do here. There's transactions, there's things we need to do, there's things we want to do. And when you look at the growth of advisory is a very broad church. It covers so many different areas, due diligence, corporate finance, forensics. It's not one service line. It's lots of service lines, but with that common aim of advising clients. So I think that a lot of those really speak to the things that clients value, specific advice, expert advice, sometimes quite niche, sort of very detailed area where they haven't got in-house expertise to do it. They really need that support. So I think it's been a growth area for a long time, of course, but I think it's an incredibly important area for clients who go, I'm comfortable to hear, I want some good advice to hear, and I want someone who really gets the environment that I'm working in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess speaking of advisory services, we've obviously seen with EY recently the plan to sort of spin off that part of the business. Big, long-standing plans completely broken down. It was a big story in the industry. I wonder if we could sort of just briefly touch on that and talk a little bit about what you think the wider significance is of that. What perhaps can be learned by it. From your perspective, what is the significance?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no one ever said it was going to be easy. It's incredibly difficult to change models, and obviously the detail around that EY split, not split, is very much in the public domain. I mean, what do you learn from that? Big global partnerships do really struggle to make seismic change because you have to get so many people on side. So if you're really trying to change the super tanker in a really dramatic way, it is quite difficult to do, which is partly a function of a partnership model. I think it also shows that there is a demand out there for multidisciplinary services. I think when you go back to the client, and we're all driven by client needs, do they feel comfortable with having a non-multidisciplinary organisation? Are there pros and cons of going in other routes? Well, yeah, undoubtedly there are, but multidisciplinary, I think, is probably something that clients are saying they prefer. I think that comes out in the market. But I think it also adds to that slight turbulence in professional services firms, because add on to that particular scenario, you've got PE houses coming into our market, you've got consolidations, you've got some long-standing organizations that have shifted quite dramatically. They've either gained a lot or lost a lot because of these movements in the market. And I think you're going to see that for another couple of years as you move the deck chairs around. There is a real shift taking place, and you saw this a couple of decades ago, when professional services environment really changed. There's something about size that I think becomes important there. I think people do like to have a level of stability that size can bring. It gives you more depth, it gives you more credentials. And I think there's also something very important there around cross-border ability. Because if I look at what an organization might want. They want to have a firm that can service them across borders. So they have a consistency of service. They have a sense that I really like working with you here. Can you work with me in a similar way over there? I aspire to be over there as well. Can you help me with that? And that's where global accounting firms come into their own.
You mentioned one thing you touched on there was the sort of trend of PE increasingly coming into the market. It's something we've seen a lot of lately. I'm curious, how does that, from your perspective, how does that relate, to Baker Tilly in terms of consolidation, further consolidation plans and growth plans in the future? Is there anything you can sort of share on that side of things?
Well, I think like all growing, and we are very ambitious, all growing organisations, we're keen to explore options. We look at M&A in all our domestic territories, and we're also happy to look at good inorganic options, be that teams, be that firms, be that more than one firm. So we're very happy to explore that. From our perspective, there's something around quality that remains hugely important. You don't just grow for the sake of growing. It's all about sustainable, profitable growth. And it's also about being open to opportunities. So we're very keen to see where the future will take us. We think we've actually got a lot more growth to come, but we're also really mindful of the fact we don't just want to jump into every single thing that comes along if it doesn't meet our core aim of what we're looking to do. And we're very clear that we're there servicing the mid-market. We're very happy doing that. We see that as being our core function. We do offer some really clear services, and we want to have a good cultural fit. So we're looking for our growth to come in the spaces we know we're good in, but also good cultural fit.
I think that kind of leads us on quite nicely, because obviously digitalisation and kind of creating unity in that sense is always a big part of that process. And this has obviously been very topical in the market recently, with the emergence of ChatGPT and that kind of sparking wider discussions around the application of AI in professional services. So can you tell me a little bit about what that sort of journey, if you can call it that, looks like at Baker Tilly, and how you're sort of implementing that? Are there perhaps certain functions that kind of artificial intelligence technology lends itself to best, do you think?
Well, I think there's so many things that have already been taking advantage of some of the great technology, but you use bots, you use all sorts of different mechanisms to help you do some of the repetitive work, do it more effectively, and then also provide a support structure. Generative AI is fascinating. I mean, it's the opportunities are only just being explored. No one knows exactly how it's going to impact professional services. What we all do know is it's going to impact professional services.
Yeah.
So there's a huge amount. We're very early days of this, but of course we're exploring it. We're talking about it a lot. We're sharing examples. We're sharing use cases. We're showcasing within our organization what's working well, what could we learn from. We're interacting with our strategic partners to see how we can use it more effectively. Can it help with certain areas more than others? And then the bottom line, of course, is you still need that wonderful sprinkle dust of humanity, because technology in itself is a brilliant enabler. It can save time. It can really spark you, but it doesn't take your creativity away. It's all about using your humanity alongside it.
Yeah, I mean, looking towards wrapping up now, I think, but we obviously at the beginning spoke a little bit about how you're approaching 1 year in your current role, and your experience and challenges during that time. So I think kind of the same question, but just looking ahead. Where do you see that journey going? Whether it's it's to do with growth, different service lines. What are your key priorities?
Yeah, well, there's probably 3 that I'll share with you, because 1 year in, I've really excited about what the future holds for us. So right at the top there is sustainable, profitable growth. Hugely important for us to keep on growing in a thoughtful and reflective way, with quality right up there. The second piece is around raising the profile of our organization. We're a little bit of a hidden gem out there. Not everybody knows us as well as some of those big names, but we have such an amazing quality of people, such an extraordinary network. I want to make sure we continue to raise our brand profile so people know that we've got a lot to offer and they should come and have a chat. And the third thing for me is to continue to make us an attractive place to come and join. I've moved here. I'm really excited about my Baker Tilly journey, and I'd love to give that opportunity to other people as well, who can see it as a place where they can grow, where they can learn, where they can develop, and have an incredible people experience.
Great, got it. Really appreciate that. Well, I think that's just about all we've got time for. But thanks so much again for taking the time. I really appreciate you speaking to me.
Sam, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this Accountancy Age Q&A session. Please do visit accountancyage.com for more news and analysis from the UK accounting sector, and be sure to subscribe to our daily newsletter. Bye for now.